I will be presenting a lesson on copyright rules for a third grade class using the Assure model. The objectives of the lesson are that student will be able to define copyright in their own words. Objective 2, student will give examples of what is allowed and not allowed under copyright rules. And 3, student will explain the importance of copyright. For A, analyze your learners. For student population, I will be teaching a third grade general education class with 2 students who receive special education support, one with dyslexia and one with ADHD. For prior knowledge assessment, we will have a brief discussion to evaluate prior knowledge of copyright rules before I begin my presentation. We will utilize a KWL chart. We will document what the students know, what they want to know, and what they've learned, which we will complete following the lesson. For learning preferences, the lesson presentation includes visual slides and verbal explanations for both visual and auditory learners. There will also be activities woven throughout the lesson that will give kinesthetic learners the opportunity to do hands-on learning. For differentiation, there will be extensions available for GT learners. For example, following the lesson, we might have a discussion prompt. Imagine a world without copyright rules. What would that look like? Giving them a chance to expand. I will also provide accommodations for learners with IEPs. For example, for the student with dyslexia, possibly a printed handout with simplified language and visuals. And for the student with ADHD, making sure they have access to fidgets or a wiggle cushion if necessary. For the S, state standards and objectives, my lesson will align with the TEKS Technology Application Standard 3.9.B, which states the student is expected to communicate the purpose of copyright law and identify appropriate and inappropriate uses of digital content and information. And as stated before, the objectives include student will be able to define copyright in their own words. They will identify examples of what is allowed and not allowed under copyright law. And they will explain why copyright rules are important using at least one reason from the lesson. For S, select strategies and resources. My instructional strategy is I will provide direct instruction via a lecture-based presentation. It will be supported by guided instruction during the lesson, partner activities throughout, and individual practice towards the end. For my technology resource, I will be using a digital presentation, and I will also be utilizing superstructures for individual practice towards the end of the lesson. For accessibility considerations, I consider the font size, the color contrast, and spacing in my digital presentation. For U, utilize resources. For instruction preparation, I will be sure to rehearse the presentation. I will make sure the smart TV is connected and working properly. To prepare the environment, I will arrange tables so that students have a clear view of the smart TV. I will group students accordingly to minimize distractions during the presentation. To prepare technology, I will be sure to have the online presentation prepared, as well as the superstructure activity and the Google form evaluation that will be used to evaluate student learning at the end. And to prepare the students, I will be reminding them to be active listeners and to encourage participation and discussion throughout the lesson. For R, to require learner participation, I will be using discussion prompts, so I will be sure to pause after important slides and check for understanding by asking questions pertaining to the information shared. For example, is it okay to play an entire song on your website, and guiding a discussion throughout. I will use Think, Pair, Share, asking students to discuss a scenario with a partner before a whole group share. I will be utilizing a technology tool called Superstructures for students to practice sorting when it is allowed and not allowed to use a creator's materials. And differentiation, I will allow students to share on a Post-it note instead of with a partner if that is more in their comfort zone. I will also allow a student to work with a partner on superstructures if they need assistance with reading. For E, evaluate and revise. I will be providing a student assessment. At the end of the lesson, students will complete a 3 to 5 question exit ticket on Google Forms. where they will be asked to define copyright in their own words, to identify examples of what is allowed and not allowed, and 3, to explain why copyright matters and why it is important. Following the lesson, I will complete a student learning rubric for each student, which will include this assessment and if students met these objectives, and also what I observed during the lesson. For the informal assessment, I will make observations during the presentation of which students are participating in the discussion, and I will be able to identify who may need reteaching. And following the lesson, I will do my own instructor self-evaluation where I will reflect on the pacing, the student engagement, student knowledge, and ways that I can improve the lesson for next time. Thank you.